California, in all likelihood, will run are you ready for this? A $20 billion deficit every year for the next 10 years. I heard that and I thought, my God, what will happen to our state? And then you'll recall the other night we were talking about the fact that they're talking or projecting a $2 billion shortfall by the middle of this year. And if that happens, there'll be massive cuts in education, in parks, in health services, all the way around. So I have to tell you, it's very interesting. There is a group here in California called California Common Sense. Now, you've heard them here on the news on KGO. Students at Stanford University who got together. It's a Stanford University-based nonprofit. And according to their statement, devoted to opening government financial data to the public, informing citizens about governmental inefficiencies, and promoting effective and efficient government policies. Now, I have two key members of their team with me here in studio. Bacon Sloss, who is a senior at Stanford University, and Nate Levine, who is a junior at Stanford University. Both, by the way, are planning to take time off. Nate was telling me he's going to take next year off in order to really work on this full time. So, gentlemen, I want to welcome you here to KGO. And let me start out with you, Dakin. What exactly are you aiming at in terms of California's fiscal crisis?
Thank you so much for having me, John. It's a real pleasure to be here and tell you a little bit about what we're doing at California Common Sense. About a year ago, we got together along with Joe Lonsdale, a Stanford entrepreneur and investor who is a recent graduate of Stanford. He, along with Matt Cook and Nate as well, were all very passionate about the future of California and thought there wasn't a good enough source of information out there. And so they started California Common Sense to be a source about financial information.
What do you do?
What do? We put up data online in interactive visualizations, or in a little bit simpler language, we make data easy and fun to play with so people can understand the complex policy issues that we're facing.
Give me an example.
So, for example, we just launched on July 12th a comparative map of the country, how the states are spending their money. In particular, you can go see facts like corrections in California is spending 60% more than in other states, and see what sort of things are working, what things aren't working, where we're overspending, and really get hard evidence for what sort of policies we need to be taking.
All right, you issued a press release today saying the governor's office again has denied California Common Sense access to the state's checkbook. And you indicated in this release that the response claims that the denial is due to the fact that the California government does not maintain detailed spending for its $200 billion in annual disbursements.
Yeah, that was a shocking discovery to make. We began in making this transparency portal by making public records requests to every state entity, to which the governor's office responded and told us that we could not fulfill those requests because there was no such detailed record easily publicly available. And as we've continued to go through this process, it's become clear that California really doesn't have the tools to show its citizens the basic facts about how it's spending money.
How is it possible? I hope maybe there are members of the state legislature listening, and if there are, hopefully they'll call in. How is it possible that there is a lack of centralized state checkbook in terms of transparency? Shouldn't we know what's going on?
I mean, I can't speak to it other than saying I agree with you, John. It should be that way. Unfortunately, we're using a 30-year-old accounting system. There's just no centralized state checkbook, and there's no easy way to access it and show taxpayers how their money's being spent.
You report the state enters only about 15% of its state spending records into CalSTARS. What's CalSTARS?
CalSTARS is the state's central accounting system, but it's not used across all executive entities. And then there's all the money that's going out to local governments, that's going out to education, that's going out all over the place, where the best level of detail you can see is it's a local disbursement. It went to this university. And those entities that are not directly the federal or the state government don't have as much accountability in terms of reporting what they have to, what they're spending their money on. And even those executive entities themselves are not entering good enough detail to really understand where it's going.
So you also indicate that 85% of spending never enters the central system. And how is that possible? I mean, if I were a state senator, I worked as chief of staff to a member of the state senate. If I'd wanted this information, could I have gotten hold of it?
We've actually been talking to quite a few legislators, and they have the same sort of response. God, we're really frustrated with the CalSTARS system. All we can get out of it is a few simple PDF reports summarizing how spending was, but not any real good detailed data to do comprehensive analyses of how we could be doing this better.
Nate, you're taking a leave of absence for a year in order to work on this. What is it you hope to accomplish?
Well, I think that if we really work hard on this and put a year of time into it, we can try and get all of the state's data available. And that's just not at the state level, but that's down at the county level and the city level. And I think once we do that and make this data available and allow people throughout the state and the country to really see where their money's going, it will start a dialogue where people are talking less about, whether we need to cut taxes, or raise taxes, or cut spending, or raise spending, but we can just talk about how can we make the system more efficient. So that's really what I want to see come out of all this work. I want to see the dialogue change to how do we fix the system as it is.
8080810. I want your reaction to this. I was stunned to realize that we cannot get a detailed spending chart for $200 billion in annual disbursements. Now, we love the state of California. We want this state to work, and we're going to talk more with our guests about how we can do that. My friend Leslie sent me an email, which comes directly from Senator Tim Johnson, saying taxpayers should know where their money is being spent. And your contention is they don't. You're undertaking an initiative tomorrow relative to the legislature. Explain that to us, please.
So as some of you may know, Assemblyman Portantino and Speaker Perez have been having some heated discussions in the Assembly about a dispute about legislative budgets. And as a consequence of this, Assemblyman Portantino has asked to see detailed legislative budgets that have not previously been available. And that request was denied.
By who?
By the Rules Committee of the Assembly.
Why?
They say that it would be violating the privacy of legislators and their staffers, according to the Legislative Open Records Act. But as you might have seen in the news, a lot of people think that that's kind of questionable reading of the act, which itself is a pretty weak transparency act. But I think we believe pretty strongly that information should be out there, and that this isn't a particularly fair decision thus far. But the Sacramento Bee and LA Times are fortunately suing to get that information. And also earlier
Who are they suing?
They're suing the legislature, I guess, to get the California state legislature. But the California state legislature did release some data earlier this week showing 2009, 2010 budgets. They still won't show the current budgets. But what we did all day today...
I have a question. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm just curious about this.
Sure.
If I remember the California State Senate and I wanted that information, could I get hold of it?
No, actually. So that's the whole conflict here. Assemblyman Portantino cannot get access to this budget information himself in order to shape better policies for our state. He just doesn't have the information that would be required to do that. And that's what the whole conflict's about, that neither he nor the people of California can see that data.
I don't understand how a member of the legislature who is required to vote on something can't see the data. Can you explain that to me?
I can't explain it to you a whole lot. It doesn't make sense, and that's why we're here, to try and make some sense out of things, to make better policies that are common sense, like common sense of letting the decision makers see the data required to make decisions. And that's what we're doing tomorrow. We're putting up the data that they already released so far, which was just for the past, not for current budgets. And what we found already is there's huge discrepancies between what they're reporting as budgeted and what was actually spent. And just different records that they've released have huge inconsistencies in the millions of dollars.
What's your website?
cacs.org. We would love for people to go check that out tomorrow around 10 a.m. That data visualization will be up on the homepage, and you can see how the legislature is reporting its spending its money and some other evidence that we have that that's not quite the case.
Nate, you mentioned the question of the judiciary, and I want you to comment on that as well. 8080810. I want you to know these are Stanford students. They're doing their homework. They're doing their research, and maybe students have a better opportunity and more of an instinct for going for the jugular than our political figures do. They've got no axe to grind. But what they're reporting is really quite shocking. If members of the legislature can't have access to the very material they're voting on and how the money is being spent, if we are told that we are unable to have accountability, well, I'm telling you, that's outrageous.